Hello there, guys. Welcome to this episode of Elite Foundations podcast. Today, we are joined by Rory, who was a recent participant of one of Itamar's arenas. And we are going to have a chat with him and find out how the experience was.
Yeah, so guys, Rory, just to give him a quick intro, Rory is the co-founder at Counselling Tutor. Counselling Tutor helps counselors and counseling students with academic resources and online continuing professional development. And he's a trained therapist himself, and he's also the head of trainings at Counselor Tutor. Rory was a part of one of the recent Mindset Accelerators. He was actually in the same cohort as Emil. And he had some interesting, the reason we wanted to have him on were two reasons. One, he had some really interesting breaks with himself, which I think can inspire people and can show them what's possible. And two, as a therapist himself, he can also give a different kind of explanation than I would as to why these things are possible and how people can achieve them. And for that reason, I'm very excited to have you on. So welcome, Rory. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you very much.
All right. So Rory, let's just dive into it, man. You wanted to sign up for the program.
Yes. I mean, I'm a business owner, and our business is growing. Counsellingtutor.com is growing, and scaling very nicely. And one of the things is I felt I was a bit struggling in the business. Maybe I wasn't being as decisive as I should be. I was getting, incredibly stressed out. And I thought that instead of going down the usual route, which I do usually, which is going to see my therapist, I thought I would try a coaching approach and see if that would give me probably more structure than seeing a therapist. And I have to say that I tried coaching before, and I have to say that it was a little bit too woolly for me. It was a little bit too woolly. It wasn't very structured. The person was lovely. Don't get me wrong, the person was lovely, but it wasn't for me. And that kind of put me off a bit. So I decided to take the leap again and join your coaching program. And I found it really transformative in such a short space of time.
So Rory, let me ask this. Why was the old coaching? What was the issue with it? Why didn't it serve you?
Well, I think it served me because I'm not, even though I'm a psychotherapist, I'm not a very fluffy person. I tend to deal in the realities of the world and help my clients grasp the realities of the world, because we live in the world as it is, not as the world as we'd want it. And I think that's a very important lesson that, that we could all take away, really. And also, the big difference, I think, was that it was a lot more structure in the one that you ran. And also it wasn't just one-to-one. There was a number of people. So it was interesting to see that other business owners, other high-performing business owners, were engaging with much the same issues that I was experiencing. And I think that group of community, that esprit de corps, to use a military term, I think was the key thing that kind of pushed me up to the next level. And of course, you gave some great tools. It wasn't just a friendly chat. There was some tools. There was focus within the teaching, which I was really pleased about, being a teacher myself. That was the key thing. The fact there was something to focus on. There was an end goal. So important. In fact, I was reading my Stoic philosophy book today, and one of the things that Seneca says is you cannot, without a goal, you can't score. I paraphrase that. I don't think that Seneca used that, but it's true. And as I say, I came away a different person, a very different person. It was just transformative.
So let's talk about this, Rory. What was the transformation, if you had to describe it? Could I give the listeners you told them that before they were a bit indecisive and all that.
Yeah.
What is the after? So we first take that, and then we tell you how they can get there.
Well, I think the first thing was that, we're all stretched out kids, and leaving behind our past and the messages that we got in our past and the fantasies we create in our past is essential for us to live our own lives as our own people. Not to live them for other people, but to live them for ourselves and our own values. One of the things that I identified on the arc of this was that actually I'd kind of invested a lot into my late father. And embarrassingly enough, and it was quite embarrassing, but I will share it, in that my father died when I was 17. So I had to invent a father that I would look up to. And of course, through the arc of this training, I realized that it was my invention. It wasn't him. And that the only person I need really to look up to is myself. And that was a pretty groundbreaking moment. And it was a moment within the course where that was highlighted. You highlighted it and it was like, yeah, that's right. Then I was able to kind of just free myself up from that. It was like putting a big bag down.
Yeah. And Rory, for context of the listeners, can you tell them how old you are today? You said at 17, your father had passed. And how long have you been holding on to this?
Be interesting. We should let the listeners guess how old I am, and then I'll tell them. I'm presently 63, and in a couple of months I'll be 64.
Nice.
Yeah.
Quick question there, Rory. You talk about all of us being stretched out kids, and a lot of how we behave and think now is related to our upbringing, right?
Yes.
Now, this is a key or core concept within therapy as well. And only because we discussed this, Itamar and I, yesterday. How did the Arena differ from your experience of therapy, given that you're a therapist? Because I've had limited experience of therapy, I've had limited experience of coaching, and there's differences. But I was just wondering your more expert opinion.
Well, thank you very much. I think that in therapy generally, therapists engage, well, a lot of therapists engage with where the client is in terms of their perception of things. And I think sometimes with coaching, it's a little bit more straightforward. It's a case of, it's a more directive approach. So in therapy, lots of therapists like myself put a lot of stock in non-direction. In other words, you are who you are and you'll find your own way. And I think there's value to that. And I think for emotional problems, being able to kind of untangle that in with someone you trust and being able to find your way is very, very useful. But I do think there is a place in where, and this is where coaching comes in, where there's there's almost like a diagnosis, not as harsh as a diagnosis, but it seems to me this is the issue. And when that's presented, it's a kind of, right, yeah, I never thought of it like that. So that's that. I would say, Emil, that's the main difference. Coaching is more directive, and the coach role, by its very nature, is more directive. That doesn't mean it's not supportive or empathic or thoughtful, but it is more directive. That's what I got out of it.
That's
Emil, why did you start laughing? I'm curious. Why is that immediately? Why was that funny to you?
Because it was pretty much what we kind of said yesterday, but it was like the way Rory said it. This is the issue. Let's sort it out. Instead of kind of beating around the bush and being gentle is the wrong word, but being kind of fluffy.
So
just being
here's
like
the thing. Yeah. So here's what I want to say to this. I think this is it's misunderstood. How you said gentle? It's like you can absolutely be very, very, very direct, but also extremely caring.
Yeah.
You don't have to be gentle, but you can be extremely caring. And I think that's what most people don't recognize, that you can't have both. You can't be gentle and fluffy and direct. That doesn't work. But you can have extreme amounts of empathy and be extremely caring and do it out of a place of genuinely wanting to help somebody and be extremely direct because of that. Because you recognize that unless you're going to be extremely direct with him, he might not get these things. He might not get the result that he wanted, the life that he wants. I think that's a big misconception.
And the risk. Sorry, go on, Rory.
No, please, Emil, go for it.
I was just going to say the risk with being direct is, potentially in maybe a less skilled coach would be that the person becomes defensive and shuts off if you're not loving enough, potentially.
Exactly.
Even then.
And that's the thing. It's like that's a skill set.
Showing
somebody that you care so much about them that, listen, we have to be direct about this because I want you to succeed. And I think usually when people understand that you're genuinely on their side and you want what's best for them, they're very receptive. And that's a skill set to be able to convey that to people.
I would absolutely agree with that. And again, I'll pick up on that point. You can be caring and you can be direct, but it lies within the skill set. And that's what I experienced, within the Arena, that caring but direct and facing up to it. And the other aspect that I'd like to kind of talk about is that within therapy, there's a great tradition of what's called a reparenting style. So what happens is the therapist becomes a surrogate parent for the client until they can self-regulate themselves. And I don't know if you're aware of this, Itamar, but you did that. You didn't replace my father. But actually, the messages that I heard were, you're your own man. You need to sort this out. You know, I paraphrase again. And that was really interesting because I never had that message. And that was that's a really important message. I'm thinking about, in having reflected on it, it's a message I say to my daughter, this is your issue. How are you going to sort that out? You know, and I think it was a lesson that I'd probably taught my children, but I hadn't learned very well myself, if I'm honest.
Yeah. It's interesting, Rory, because, like, to be honest, what the main thing I wanted you to take away from the whole program and what I saw from the start, it wasn't that, because at the beginning I felt like you thought you need to become more, because you have the business partner who's also like very successful, is a very clear thinker in some ways, and you're like, man, I need to become more in order to match up to that. And the reality was that you were already more than enough. You just needed to see yourself for that.
Yes.
Because that gave you the confidence to be able to, again, assert your opinion over the things where you own the professional domain.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, you know, as I say, these, you know, a lot of the difficulties I was having, I was working a lot of fantasy ideas, not the reality, which is again why coaching is really useful, because you get brought back to reality. You know,
can you give an example for the listeners? What was like a fantasy you were working on? What was the reality?
Well, I mean, one of the fantasies I had about myself was that maybe I wasn't good enough, and maybe, you know, that in terms of being, you know, a business person, I wasn't businessy enough, whatever that was. And I have no idea what that even meant, which I think says a lot. The fact that you know, I need to be more businessy. Well, what does that mean, Rory? I have no idea. And through the arc of the training, I realized that every business owner has anxieties and second guess themselves. That's the nature of being your own person. Don't get it right all the time. But I think the reality is that, you know, I am good enough.
More than good enough.
Well, more than good enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm more than good enough. I you know, and I've taken that away. It's been a very big change, and I've spent a lot of money on therapy through the years to try and get there. And it was a coaching course that got me to that place.
Okay, so I want to talk about something that you also elaborated a little bit on the calls about. We talked about, I call identity lack, that we see ourselves for the person who we were, not the person we are today. You had a different term for that. What was that term?
Oh gosh, well, I'm not quite sure. I mean, sometimes it's interjected values and conditions of worth. Was that the term?
No, I think it was an R word, something referencing.
Oh, frame. Oh, yes, thank you. Yes, frame of reference.
Frame of reference.
We have a frame of reference. So, you know, our identity is sometimes drawn from other people's frames of references, or from frames of references we invent for ourselves. You know, as human beings, we tend to invent things. I mean, there's lots of psychologists who talked about automatic negative thoughts. I mean, that's a big one in cognitive behavioral therapy, and everybody has them. You know, I'd ask your listeners to think when they had a really unacceptable thought in their lives. And maybe there's a few people even feeling guilty about that. You know, did I really think that? Well, we all have them. Our brain throws up all sorts of nonsense. And it's up to us to manage that and say, well, you know, that's an interesting thought, but I won't be driving over a bus shelter full of people today. You know, it's not what we think, it's what we do, isn't it? It's our actions, not our thoughts. And frame of reference is how we sometimes view our world. Sometimes it comes from the philosophy of phenomenology, our lived experience. Yeah.
Rory, to clarify, is it how we view the world or how we view ourselves in relation to the world?
Both.
Okay.
Both. So our frame of reference is not only how we view the world that goes around us, but also our place in the world and who we are in that world.
Yeah. And sorry, go ahead.
And part of personal development is about auditing who you are, not who you were. And that will always link back a lot to childhood messages. A lot of the messages that we have of children, as I say at the beginning of the piece, we stretched out kids. We still carry the messages that were given in childhood, and they're not valid as we get older. They're not valid at all, or some of them aren't valid.
Yeah, I think that little soundbite you have, that it's auditing who we are right now, not who we were.
Yeah,
that is so massive.
Yeah. And as we go through our lives, we'll make lots of mistakes. We'll make mistakes all parts of our lives, but it's not being defined by that. It's being defined by who we are and our values, and understanding our value structure, which was something else that was touched on within the coaching course. What are your values? Who are you? And it's only when you look to your values, you realize the person you are.
Yeah. It's interesting because we also didn't talk just about what are your values and what values do you need to start adopting.
Exactly.
On an honest level. Forget about what comes naturally. Like, in order to become that person you want, or to have the life that you want, what values should you adopt? You need to adopt.
Absolutely. But as I say, it was transformative. I'm a lot less anxious. Now I find myself, moving along in the business, developing the business with relative ease. I mean, it doesn't mean that there won't be challenges or difficulties going forward, but it's how I'll engage with those. It was a wonderful experience, absolutely wonderful. And you meet great people, and that's the whole thing. You're meeting other people, and you're engaging with them and helping them.
And just to jump in there, I talk about this a lot with any intervention, therapy, coaching, having something tangible before and after, beyond just this warm glow when you're kind of during the experience, kind of catharsis, like actually having a change afterwards, which maybe you can't measure in centimeters, but you can measure in, I am less anxious. Previously, I was anxious 7 times a week. Now it's 3 times. That's significant. That's big. That's life-changing. And I just wanted to highlight that, because that's integration. That's like something actually happened here that's taken you to another level. And you can now see, if you did that more, or continued peeling off the layers of the onion, life will just get better step by step, or quantum leap by quantum leap, however you want to look at it.
Absolutely, Emil. And that is one of the big differences between therapy and coaching. In therapy, a lot of therapists don't measure progress. So
that's why I could never do that.
So interestingly enough, I think I mentioned this yesterday, I have a therapist. I've had one for about 18 months, and I probably will always have one. And it's very different to coaching, as we've discussed, but I kind of was very, very specific. I need progress. I need measurable improvements. I need my life to increase. I don't just want to feel good and, bathe in this kind of warm glow of chatting to someone. No, like, we need to do this. And she was super open to it, which is why I stuck with her, because she was like, yes, this is great. Like, and she works with entrepreneurs, and I feel a lot of us are like this. So it was just super interesting that you're right. Most maybe don't do this, and most people maybe don't want that,
Yes. Yeah. I think that's a very good point. Some people may just want to tell their story and be heard, and the therapist bear a witness to their lives. And certainly many thousands of hours I've sat with clients, that's exactly what my role was. It was clear it was a contracted environment. But there is some people, and I'm amongst those, want measurables, want milestones that I can say, well, I did this yesterday, but I'm not doing this today. And I thought the Arena produced that in spades. Really did. There's lots of that.
Rory, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, in a very measurable milestone, I remember at the beginning you said you had a bit of trust issues.
Yes.
And you weren't delegating the way you should in your business. You're doing things that you should not be doing. Has that changed?
It's getting better. I'm not going to lie and say, oh yes, now I just delegate left, right, and center. I was working with a lovely colleague yesterday, and I was delegating some stuff off, and she said, you never actually say you're doing this, but you say to me, so if you could take care of that, that'll be great. And I guess that's delegating, and I'm volunteering for a lot less. The reason I've got time to record this podcast is I've stopped saying, I'll do that, I'll do this. Yes, I could do that. I'm quite capable of doing it, but I've got colleagues who are equally, I'm better suited. They're in the seats in the business to be able to do that. And now I just say, yes, thank you. You do that. And let me have a look at it. That's fine. So I guess I'm more of a business owner by that.
Yeah. Let me ask this, Rory. What do you think was the block that got removed that enabled you to do that?
I think part of it was feeling that I wasn't on my own. I think the big thing for the experience for me was all the other people being really honest. And I think that speaks to selection, the fact that people were selected because they wanted to change. And, you know, anybody who's a therapist or a psychologist will say, only those who want to change will get the benefits. You cannot change someone who doesn't want to change. So the environment, I think the respectful and loving challenges that came from, you know, both the people who are participating and yourself, and the fact that I kind of have something to test them out. I do a little kind of experiment. I test that out. Delegated some work yesterday. The world didn't come to an end. It's measurable. The work was done. So that worked. Yeah. I was basically a bit of a scientist. It was like, you know, try that. That worked. Job done. Off we go.
Yeah. Rory, can I put you on the hot seat for a sec?
Oh, go on then.
Ask you a tangible question. So from your perspective, I've covered this in a previous episode, how to basically conquer identity lag, what I do for most people. How would you say, if you had to do something very actionable to give people a toolkit, if you have an issue with frame of reference, that you still see yourself as someone you shouldn't be seeing yourself, and you haven't audited yet who you are, and you're still kind of working on who you were, what are a couple steps that they can do to really kind of bridge that gap just by themselves, even at home right now? Okay.
The first one is, you know, as entrepreneurs and business owners, we look to the future. We always look into the future because, you know, that's good business practice. Take a breath, stop, turn back, look how far you've come. You know, where you've got in your journey, be that a personal journey or a business journey, is the work you've done, and own it. You know, somebody said to me, I don't know why you dismiss yourself. Look at what you've done. You know, you can't see this probably on the radio or the podcast, but I've got a teaching award there. There's only 35 people in the whole of the UK won that. And I was one of them. 35,000 people applied, and 35 of us won a Plato Teaching Award for outstanding use of technology in education. And sometimes it's about just acknowledging that and kind of saying, that's who I am. I've done that. I've earned my dues. I've done my bit, and that's who I am. And I'm taking who I am, which is enough, and moving forward. And the other thing is, you're good enough. Just a very simple thing. You are good enough. If you've not got to the answer yet, probably you're not asking the right questions.
What do you mean by that? If you haven't gotten to the answer, you're not asking the right question.
Well, I would say that if you're saying, well, I can't delegate, in my case, what question should I be asking? Is it because people aren't taking any notice of me? In my case, it was because I didn't trust people. And the question was, where's this idea come from? And it came from my past. It had nothing to do with my here and now, nothing to do at all with the here and now. I was carrying things from a child, and you know, from a brain perspective, the part of our brain that carries those kind of fears doesn't have a clock or a chronometer. You know, it's not linear. So sometimes we have these ideas, but they're not relevant in the here and now. Check your thinking out. You know, is how I'm feeling relevant now, or am I feeling like I was when I was a child? And if I feel like I was a child, then you have to say to yourself, actually, I'm not 7, I'm 63, soon to be 64.
Yeah. It's very interesting that you use that term, am I feeling like a child right now?
Yes.
What do you mean by that? Is it that suddenly you feel a bit like you feel lack of confidence, or what do you mean by that?
Well, in my case, the lack of trust it was kind of a fear-based activity where there would be huge consequences for trusting someone, and that kind of generated stress and anxiety. And sometimes it's really a case of not letting your feelings overtake the reality. You know, we think and feel for two different reasons, and feeling is great, You know, I love the feeling of holding my granddaughter. That's a great feeling, and my grandson. However, that is a feeling in perspective. It's not great to go through life being managed purely by your feelings, because our feelings are by nature kind of transitory and irrational. So sometimes we have to say, this is how I feel and this is how I think. I'll give you an example of that. I bought myself a Jeep. And what I had to do was I had to sit and say, what do I feel and what do I think? And I think it's going to cost me a fortune to run. Yeah. I think I probably won't be able to park it. And I think that it's probably going to cost me a lot to maintain. However, I've always wanted one. So I'll let my feelings in that case override me. But if it becomes too expensive, I'll sell it. That's when my thoughts will take over. And I think sometimes it's balancing your thoughts and your feelings. We need both to live a valuable and honorable life.
Yeah, very well said. Emil, I'd love to hear it from your perspective to kind of recap what Rory was saying about the stages, about what to do with this.
So the biggest thing that I kind of got from there was that auditing thing, that auditing of self, because that seems to, I don't want to say solve all the problems, but it's the first pebble in an avalanche which solves all the problems. It's just stopping for a moment and being like, where you know, who am I now? What have I achieved? Where are these ideas coming from? It almost doesn't matter where they're coming from. Just the fact that they're not coming from now is the most important thing. And then what's the truth now? I mean, and there's modules in the Arena, in the Mindset Accelerator, which do specifically this. It's not called a self-audit, but it's exactly that.
It is. I don't know if we talk about the 4 levels of self-awareness there. That's exactly that. And I think a really, really big thing is, I asked sometimes, I don't know if you guys have remember this. I asked one of the guys in your group. He said that this is a belief that he holds. He thinks this is not. And I asked him, where did you learn that to be true? And he was stumped. He was like, wait, I never thought about that. I had to actually learn this somehow. I thought this was just a given. And just asking sometimes that kind of question, like, where did you learn this to be true? Like, who taught you this? What situation in life showed you that this is how the world is? Having to actually think about those things, it makes us pause all of a second. Say, wait, is this actually what's the reality today? Or is this the reality that was for the person I was back then?
Yeah. And it all works within the structure, because, you know, just stopping and auditing yourself is almost moot unless you have something that you're trying to achieve, a direction, a mission statement, a point, because then there's context for it. Like, what thoughts and actions are holding me back? Okay, where do they come from? Okay, are they true in the moment? Because now they have a frame of reference. Yeah. So it's as if you've thought about this before. It all works really, really well together.
It's as if there's an arc, as Rory said. It's as if.
Yeah, it's an arc of personal development, and it's a journey we're all on, from the minute we're born to the minute we die. You know, about how we engage with the world, and it's you know, inequalities. There's a great book by a guy called M. Scott Peck called The Road Less Traveled, and it starts off by saying life isn't fair. Get used to it. And once you realize that life isn't fair, you've got one thing less to worry about: life not being fair. And I used to quote that a lot when I taught, and it was amazing how many people thought that was really harsh. But you know, sometimes the inequalities of the world we have to meet, and we have to work out how we're going to work around them and work through them. And you know, I think on the arc of personal development that happens.
It's interesting, Rory, because like how you said that some people think it's really harsh. When I first learned this, I felt a sense of freedom.
Yes.
It gave me a sense of liberty to actually be able to take power again.
Yeah.
Before that, I was looking for things to be fair. And when things weren't fair, I felt like something was against me and I was powerless, because things are supposed to be fair. So there's a problem in the world right now. All of a sudden, when like someone explained to me like life isn't fair, I was like, oh, okay, that I can keep moving and figure this out. Even if I don't get the result that I wanted, I'm not supposed to get it always, because that's just life. And all of a sudden it gave me a sense of that I can actually take ownership of my success and not just depend on things being quote unquote fair.
Yeah. And that's the difference between being 3 and 33. Yeah. When you're 3, your parents, if you know, try to make life as fair and stress-free as possible. When you get older, you engage with the world as it is, and that's part of being an adult. That's the difference between being an adult and a child.
Yeah.
And good parents, I think, help children, grasp the the inequalities of the world early on, so that they don't get to 33 and ask that question: why is life not fair?
Yeah. Do. Emil, before we kind of sign off, is there anything you want to anything you want to ask, any question you want to add to the mix?
Just one thing I want to throw into this, because it is important for the kind of greater context, is the cyclical, ongoing nature of this process, the layers of the onion, however we want to call this, because you go around this once, this self-audit, and the top layer comes off, and then things change. You're not suddenly healed, fixed, enlightened, woke. It's not suddenly problem solved, tick a box. You then go again, new things emerge, you go again, and you go again. And this is an ongoing process that, theoretically never ends. So yeah, just to highlight that, because even as kind of Rory was saying with the delegation, like the first pebble is there, the avalanche is starting, and then that maybe will uncover something else, and then we'll go around again and we'll go around again. So just to give some kind of greater perspective for this process in general.
Yeah, it's absolutely when you've done something, when you've made a step change in your life, to repeat it and make a mental note. You could write it down. What happened? What was the consequence? And the more you do it, the more it becomes a natural progression, a natural thing for you, and then you can move on to the next thing. But you're absolutely right. The journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first footstep.
Yeah, it's interesting. I kind of view it in a different way. I view it as that you learn the skill, but then you have to learn to apply it every time on a higher degree of difficulty. So for example, like delegation, first with just one person on something that is very low, like they can do it. It's automated pretty much. Next time is actually having more trust in somebody and something that you're not actually sure what to delegate. You tell them I have a problem. And we keep ascending in these degrees of difficulty with this one thing we're unlocking. That's what I've experienced myself, for example.
It's greater degrees of difficulty in absolute terms, but relatively it's just another step.
Yes.
So yeah, for sure it's bigger and bigger things, but you're equipped to that level, and you're always just leaning into your edge. You're pushing the next boundary. You're not going to go from 0 to running an organization of 1,000 people overnight, but the first thing is going to be to ask someone to do something and then go from there.
Absolutely. And I think the motto that I'd take away from you, Itamar, was you were saying in your training when you're in the military, they said run as fast as you can and then run faster.
Start as fast as you can and then gradually increase your speed.
Yeah. And I think that's very true, because with that becomes discomfort, and it's only when we feel discomfort is where real growth happens. No one gets growth, I don't think, where they're feeling comfortable. It's only when you're feeling uncomfortable, be you an athlete or be you a business owner or be you anything in life. It's only when there's a degree of difficulty where you could actually say there's some growth happening.
Yeah. Well said. Rory, is there anything else you want to say before we part ways for today?
Well, no, thank you very much for inviting me on the podcast. I've enjoyed my time. I'd highly recommend the Arena. It was transformative for me. You meet wonderful people, as evidenced by the two guys I'm talking to on the podcast. And I'm forever grateful that I've engaged with it. So thank you very much.
I appreciate that, Rory. I want to say something to the listeners here. My main goal from this episode with Rory is to showcase an example that you don't always need more. A lot of times we think we want more success or better success in our business or whatever it may be, and we feel like we have to do more. Rory is a phenomenal example of somebody who's built a very impressive business, who's an award-winning teacher, who's done a lot of great things in his life. And he's an example that we don't always need more. We just need to step up into who we are. It's about realizing that we're more than we think. And I think Rory also shared some really tangible tools on how you can do this as a frame of reference, which I really appreciate, Rory. And honestly, for a lot of you guys out there, before you think of adding more, ask yourself, am I just not acting in line with myself? Because I might be more. I might be more than enough to tackle the next challenges that I have on my plate. Anything else, Emil? Should we wrap it at that?
Let's wrap it at that. That's That's a mic drop.
Awesome. Thank you very much, guys. We will see you on the next episode.
See you on the next episode. Thank you, Rory.
Thank you.